Hello everybody, welcome to my first Blood Bowl video. It's a multiplayer video versus my opponents who will be the Box Boys, who are a Vampiric team, as you can see here, with my Halfling team, the Twinkle Tits. Now, Halflings, I might as well explain the teams to you. Halflings are basically kind of like the Hobbits from Lord of the Rings, except much more useless and feeble at everything they do. They basically aren't particularly athletic or powerful, so they've got awful stats, can't really move particularly far, not very strong, not particularly agile, but actually their agility is quite decent for their abilities involved, and their armor's awful, meaning they get hurt very often. Very easy to knock them out or kill them. But they don't seem to mind. However, they do also have treemen on their side, which are extremely strong, very hard to knock down, but incredibly slow and unathletic. They're generally like moving statues that are capable of annihilating your opponent, but they can also do this one special thing, which is launch your players across the pitch, which is incredibly useful for scoring, as you may see in this video. On my opponent's side, we have the Vampires, who also have two types of players. The Vampires, who are pretty much good at everything, but have this particular problem, which is suffering from bloodlust, whereby if they fail their bloodlust roll, which is 1 on a 6-sided dice, they then need to feed off one of their own players, one of the thralls basically, and if they don't stand next to one of their players and feed on him, which will result in that player becoming stunned through to badly hurt, which are quite bad things, they will then get sent off the pitch. So you really need to keep your thralls quite spread out and around the pitch for your vampires to feed on, should they potentially fail their bloodlust rolls. Otherwise you'll start losing your good players. The thralls themselves are just generic linesmen. They're not particularly good at anything, but not particularly bad at anything, apart from their armor. Their armor's pretty awful actually, meaning they do get stunned a lot, at the very least, if not knocked out or killed outright. But here the game begins, and as you can see, the vampires kick straight off into my right flank here, whereby I'm thinking of, well, obviously I need to get the ball, but at that point, since the ball is so clearly there in the right flank, so deep in it, I'm going to basically need to shift my whole team over to that flank and try to protect it as well as I can. Luckily the treemen are fairly near the ball, so I've got that little bit of help there. First thing I do, as you see here, is send my treemen forward to blitz this thrall, in an effort just to kind of hold back their line a little bit, and luckily his mighty blow kicks in and knocks out one of their thralls. Knocking out the thralls of the vampires team can be a good strategy in and of itself, just because the more thralls that are gone, the less thralls are around for the vampire team to feed on, and if they haven't got thralls around to feed on, they start running off the pitch willingly anyway, so it's a very useful tactic to be pulled off against them. If their thralls are all on the floor and they fail a bloodlust roll, they're screwed, or they've got to run over to the few thralls that are still standing and completely screw up their own strategy, basically moving all their men out of position. They're quite tough to use, vampires, but probably not as hard as the halflings, just because the halflings are so dreadful at everything apart from dodging. Dodging they're very good at, because one, they have the dodge skill, which means if they fail a dodge, they can always re-roll it, and every single one of them can do that, and on top of that they have the stunty skill, which allows them to dodge through people's tackle zones as though they weren't even there. However, they aren't particularly good at picking up balls, it would seem. Well, they've got agility 3, which means all they need to do is, well, if the ball's not in a tackle zone, all they need to do is roll a 3 or more, because it'll be a 4 or more, plus the natural add 1 modifier just for trying to pick it up. But somehow we managed to completely screw it up. I imagine I used a reroll there, but I either failed it twice or I'd used one up earlier. And now, as you can see, the Vampiric team are sending their guys up on that right flank as well. I had a bit of a contingency plan going, whereby I put that halfling on the far left in quite deep in an effort to potentially throw the ball over there, should things go really bad in my section, but they've got their vampires completely surrounding those guys now, so the chance that that's going to work is very low. As you can see here, his vampire guy kicks my halfling dude over to the side of the pitch, which means quite soon he's going over that side of the pitch. But as you can also see, I've got 5 players standing on the sidelines waiting to be brought in. The halflings are so cheap that I make sure I have a big reserve of them, because they're so easy to hurt. You can't just take a few extras. I mean, I could have done perhaps just 2... what the hell are they called? Substitute players. But there's still a chance that more than that will get hurt in a game, meaning if I haven't got substitutes around, I will be left with just like a team of 7 dudes by the second half. As you can see here, I send my treeman in again to knock that thrall backwards into the halfling's tackle zone. If that thrall then tries to push that halfling, he'll end up moving straight into my treeman's tackle zone, unless he just stays his ground or blitzes with him. So that's a good way of creating a defensive wall then. As you can see, I've got quite a good wall stopping these vampires from pushing into me at the moment. And I'm still going to have to keep trying to pick up this ball for as long as I possibly can, or have as many goes at trying to pick it up as I can. But it shouldn't be a problem, since I've got so many rerolls. Picking up the ball on the 3 or more shouldn't be a problem, unless, as happens right here, he goes and runs his players into the tackle zone of that ball, meaning it'll then be a 4 or more to pick it up. But, you know, 2 50-50s, it should work. Unfortunately, however, on the other side of the pitch, one of my halflings gets kicked off, as you can see, and he was perfectly fine. As you see, he goes and stands next to the rest of his teammates. So even though he's not on the pitch for now, as soon as the next drive comes along, he'll be ready and able to get back into the fight. That one might not be, though, because he was knocked out, and that will happen quite a lot when you're using halflings. All in all, though, I've got to say I was pretty lucky in this game. I don't think I actually got any deaths, and for halflings, that's pretty fucking lucky. This halfling luckily has that spare space to move, so he doesn't get lobbed off the pitch. I'm not sure why he's moving his vampire there. I guess he just wants to absolutely obliterate my halfling guy, but he still doesn't need to. But he still manages to screw it up and gets himself knocked down and stunned in the process. So that's bloody handy for me. But now it's my turn. As you can see here, my treemen, whilst they have pretty terrible movement, if I go for it here, I can just about knock that thrall away from the ball, which is exactly what I do. And luckily I get a stun as well, and stand in the vampire's way for added measure, just to reinforce the fact that I don't want them anywhere near the ball. But then I managed to luckily pick it up. And from here on, we use the treeman skill of launching players across the pitch. I'd never used this before at this point, so I wasn't sure how well it would work out. But despite the fact that they never land exactly where you throw them to, for the most part, it seems to do pretty good. I mean, they don't scatter too far. In fact, the scatter can work in your favour if it pushes you further along. And there I tried to dodge out with one of my halflings, but due to failing the roll, I end up getting slaughtered, and that is one of the guys that won't be contributing for the rest of the match. But again, we have 6 subs there, waiting to take his place. Now here he comes in and blitzes this halfling across, just so that he can then move his vampire in to potentially stand in the way of my halfling, as you will see in a moment. But the thing is that it doesn't really impede halflings. The one thing that they can do pretty well is get out of people's tackle zones. What he really probably needs to do here, well, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I managed to get a really good roll on that scatter for throwing my halfling and get him really far away from the rest of the vampire players. So the best thing for him to do at this point is just to try and go for it as much as he can and get in the way of my halfling guy. I mean, again, it's not going to be the best strategy. Ideally, he'd want to try. He'd need to blitz the ball carrier, because there's a very, very, very high chance that I'll succeed in rolling out of the tackle zone and scoring here. But instead he blitzes the halfling that's in the middle of the pitch, which really doesn't help a lot. And this thrall comes in and also to try and lock up the halfling. But again, so long as I dodge to the southwest of them, I won't have any problems. It will be a simple 3 or more, and if I fail that, I can roll 3 or more again. And if I do, blam, I will score. The rest of his guys try and beat up my halflings, but to no real avail. But then I go ahead and simply score. Yeah, he really needed to. You really, with halflings, just need to blitz the crap out of them if they get the ball. You don't want to be just trying to create tackle zones unless you've got tackle zones all over the place for them to walk through, because they simply don't have. They just don't have that many problems when it comes to breaking out tackle zones. Their problems come from their weak strength, meaning you can get 2 dice blocks on them with pretty much anyone. Well, anyone that's strength 3 or above. So there we are. Our captain, star player extraordinaire, the Cheddar Chief, scores us a goal, and we are 1-0 up. And for a halfling team to do that, well, I can't honestly say it's a big achievement. It felt like a big achievement because I heard so many bad things about halflings, but in all honesty, I mean, they are definitely a decent little team. I mean, having the skills that they have for 30,000 a pop, I think it's a pretty good deal, you know? As you can see here, it goes on to the next kickoff, and my iron-footed halfling proceeds to kick the ball off the pitch, meaning that the vampire team are allowed to hand the ball off to any player they want to. He decides to run down the left flank, see if he can knock some people down, and whichever flank opens up the best will probably be the flank that he'll be wanting to run down. At the moment though, he's just making a little symmetrical pattern here and kicking my halfling players straight into the middle of the pitch, apart from this one guy who's standing a bit too close to the sidelines and is unfortunately getting set up for a surfing. He likely will be tossed off the pitch, but at least we have 4 subs. I'm sure he's not happy about that, but that is the life of a halfling, I'm afraid. And as you can see here, he runs up his vampire ball thrower and due to the vulnerability of the position he's in, he decides to hand off the ball to the vampire behind him, which is a good move on his part, because otherwise I could probably find a way around with my treatment. And also it seems that he failed his bloodlust roll, and so due to that he needed to feed on the thrall, meaning that guy isn't there to get in the way of the treatment. So if he'd have just left his vampire there with the ball in his hands, I'd have very likely been able to run over to him and blitz him with my treatment. So it was a wise move on his part to hand the ball back there. As you can see, he then moves up his thrall and just proceeds to create another tackle zone, but I blitz in with my treatment, as was going to happen no matter what quite clearly, and proceed to knock this vampire to the side and create a little bit of a tackle zone around the ball carrying vampire. That's not going to achieve a whole lot though, because the vampires have agility 4 and can dodge out on a 2 or more due to the add 1 modifier that comes with dodging, and so he won't really have a problem there. I then proceed to try and back that up by creating a little halfling wall around him. Again though, none of this really matters. If so long as his vampire ball carrier dodges towards the north, he'll simply have to roll a 2 or more to break out of it, and if he fails that, he can use a reroll, you know. And as you see there, I take the risky move of trying to dodge my halfling around the 2 thralls that have him trapped in place, but luckily, thanks to having Stunty, it's simply a 3 or more on each one of those rolls, and if he fails them, that's when dodge comes into play. The main reason why I took the risk of moving him out of that position was not just because he was going to get surfed. I'm not particularly fussed about that. It's because I really need to kind of create a wall in between his teammates and his ball carrier. So I'm best trying to lock him up here to potentially force his vampire to slow down and have to find another route towards getting to the end of the pitch. There's still 4 turns I've got burned down, and hope to God that he doesn't actually find a way to score during that time. However, his vampires have got agility 4 as said, and can probably catch the ball with a good throw. So as you can see here, I move all my halflings in an attempt to surround his vampire and thralls at the back of my pitch, and move the rest of my halflings from the bottom of the pitch upwards in an effort to surround them and hopefully get a block or a blitz on them in following turns. This one halfling, it seems, did have the ability to block, as he hadn't moved the previous turn, so he proceeds to knock down that vampire, which really screws him up. Quite helpful, because it forces him to have to get up and not be able to move as far as he'd be able to otherwise. But with my final halfling, I attempt to dodge and get towards the north part of the pitch, but he fails it, and that's not such a bad thing at that point, because it is the last one. If you're going to fail dodge roll, it's best it be on the last, most unimportant player you're doing a move with on that turn. He then proceeds to send up his vampire and thrall to try and entrap my halflings, and he does a pretty good job of it, as overall, since all his players are stronger than mine, they'll get the better end of the results when it comes to blocking. He pushes back one of my thralls, creating a nice opening for his vampire to run down, and there's very little you can do about that when you've only got strength 2. The best thing you generally want to be doing is just putting your halflings everywhere, kind of mixing them up with some gaps in between, just to create as many tackle zones as possible. You know, use the irritating nature of the halflings to your advantage. They aren't going to do too well all stacked up in the same place, as I kind of currently have them here, which was a bit of a pretty much a mistake on my part. I should really have scattered them around a little bit more. Ideally not close to the enemy players though, or at least not adjacent to them, so that they don't all have free blocks, since all those blocks will be 2 dice blocks, and most likely I won't be on a good receiving end of anything. As you can see here, my treatment proceeds to take root, which means that he can't move anymore, or at least until the next drive, so he's pretty much useless unless somebody goes and stands next to him, which they'd have to be pretty stupid to do. And since it's my turn, I decide to dodge my halflings around his ball carrier. The reason being is that I'm trying to get add 1 modifiers. I don't want to stand them next to the other enemy teammates, because if they do that they'll lose their add 1 modifiers. And then I run in with a final halfling in an attempt to lock up his vampire, but that guy fails his dodge rolls twice in a row. The more of these risks you take, naturally, eventually you're going to fail. But I really wanted to try and tie up that vampire there. I was going to then blitz with the following halfling after that one had succeeded in jumping into the tackle zone, in an effort to get a 2 dice block on the vampire, or at least a 1 dice block, but it all goes to shit when he falls over. And as you can see here, he's moving up the rest of his vampire team on my right flank. At this point he's pretty much got it in the bag. All he needs to do is dodge out on a 2 or more and run round into the arms of his helpful squaddies, which will not be allowing me to get any more nice modifiers on that ball carrier. I mean, it's still something I could potentially do thanks to the brilliance of the halflings at dodging, but one guy is off the pitch, as you can see, and it's very likely the other guy will probably be following him. He gets beaten, but yet again, somehow or another, he's just stunned, doesn't get badly hurt, and is ready for the next drive. His vampire holding the ball, however, does fail his bloodlust roll, forcing him to feed on one of the thralls. So he runs to the back here, and makes the wise decision.
Being a vampire and all.
Not at all. Nice dodge.
Of heading back after he screws up his movement a little bit and feeding on the most unimportant of the thralls, which is the guy on his left, since that one below him is creating a useful tackle zone. However, he then proceeds to hand off the ball to the thrall, and I'm not entirely sure why he does that, because that thrall is a lot more vulnerable than his vampire was, and only has a strength of 3 as opposed to 4, meaning it'll be a lot easier for me to knock the ball out of his hands. So, with that in mind, I take the risk of trying to dodge all my halflings nearby out the hell of the enemy tackle zones and towards the ball carrier in an effort to get as many add-on modifiers on the blitz as I can, and they are successful. So this guy here goes in for the blitz and is ready to knock the ball carrier over until he completely screws up his going for it roll and drops to the floor, as you do. Otherwise, that blitz had a good chance of being successful and knocking the ball out of the hands of the thrall. Unfortunately, with the amount of vampires around, the ball would have probably still landed in enemy tackle zones, and I couldn't have done much about that. They'd have probably picked it up, but at least it wouldn't have been a certainty. Now there's pretty much no way I'm going to stop him from scoring, as he runs his vampire down, kicks my guys out of the way, and simply has to hand off the ball or simply dodge out with his thrall to score himself. Hand off the ball he does, and from there on it's just a straight line to the touchline. And that's exactly what our vampire friend here does, and he earns himself a goal. Well played, sir. Well played. And so now it's 1-1, and it's anyone's game. Will it be the halflings, or will it be the vampires? I'm hoping the halflings. I mean, I actually know the result, because obviously I played this game and it's in the replay section, but I'll pretend I don't. Woo! And now, because it's turn 8, it's simply time to set up and try and achieve whatever we can with 1 turn left, which isn't going to be much. I mean, it is probably possible for us as halflings to score in 1 turn, perhaps with getting a guy to pick up the ball at the back of the field, run it down, hand it off to a halfling who's standing in the middle, have that halfling thrown by a treeman, and then using the movement of that halfling try and leg him down the pitch, probably with some GFIs. But you know, I have yet to see if that can actually be done. I'm not entirely sure just how far we can throw the halflings. I know you can't do a long pass with them. It's the one just before that. I'm just not sure entirely how far that is.
And we're off.
As you can see here, I set up all my halflings, because I don't expect to be able to score, in an offensive manoeuvre, an offensive position to be able to cause as many injuries as possible, but one of the thralls gets hit by a rock from the audience, which is one less guy for me to be able to beat upon. So I proceed to start my turn by pushing back a thrall with my treeman. Obviously I wanted more, I wanted death, you know, but didn't happen. I then proceed to blitz another thrall with my other treeman, and again another fruitless result as he simply pushes him back, I believe. Yep, these thralls are a bit too shifty for me, so all that's left there is the middle thrall. So I've got 3 halflings around him. I decide to hit him with one of the guys on the side, purely so that if I get a push result, he's still in the block area of another 2 halflings. That's the problem. You don't want to block with a middle halfling there, because if you do so, you'll consequently just push the guy out at worst and not be able to achieve anything more with your other guys. But we do knock him down. No injuries, but there you go. What else can we do with our turn here? There's no chance of us getting the ball. Well, our halflings aren't worth much, nor are the thralls, but they're still worth more to the vampire team than our halflings are to us, especially when we've got so many subs. So, let's manoeuvre our halflings around, I don't know, a particularly ugly thrall, and try and stamp on his face. That was my idea anyway. So here you can see me just manoeuvring all the guys around him, hoping that I can cause some sort of bloody injury to his head. And again, as said earlier, the more thralls you can take down, I mean, they're not just players for the enemy team that are, you know, handy to have around to create tackle zones and whatnot, but the vampires need them to feed on. The less thralls there are, the more problems the vampires are going to have in the future. If there's thralls all over the pitch that are on their backs, when they fail their bloodlust result, they're going to be screwed. And as you can see here, we foul him and we knock the guy out, which is bloody excellent. Unfortunately, our halfling gets turfed off, but not a problem. We've got more where he came from. It's a worthy decision to make. A worthy loss? Yeah, I'll go with a worthy loss. And it's half time. Now, hopefully, our opponent doesn't roll a 4 or more to get that knocked up guy back up, but unfortunately he does, and throws back on the pitch. Still though, it was a good result, you know. We always had that chance that he wouldn't be coming back. We have 2 badly injured halflings, but only in the sense that they can't come back for the rest of the game, which isn't a big deal. Look, we've got 3 more, who cares? One of those guys is actually just found fouling, so that's why he was turfed off, as you well know, because it happened 3 seconds ago. And now here we are again, setting up for the second half. Oh, and at this point I should let you know about the Halfling Master Chef. Now, there's this one particular reducement for 300,000 gold coins called the Halfling Master Chef, which allows you to roll 3 dice, and on a 4 or more you can steal one of your opponent's rerolls. We've bought that and we get extra cheap at 100,000 because we're halflings. And for halflings it's an absolutely critical inducement to take, because for 100,000 gold pieces you can not only get extra rerolls, but take them from your opponent, which is, you know, twice as good. And we proceed to roll 3 dice. All of them come up 4 or more. Consequently, we get ourselves 3 rerolls and steal 3 from our opponent. And then just to make matters worse for him, we get the brilliant coaching result. We roll higher than our opponent, and consequently we earn ourselves another reroll. So now we have a reroll for every turn left in the game, whereas our opponent only has 1, which is absolutely bloody excellent for us. So we proceed to boot off the ball into the back of the Vampire's pitch, and another one of the many lucky results we got in the game, in that we managed to boot the ball right to the back of the pitch, whereby we're going to have to make our opponent at least work a little bit to get the ball. And as you can see here, since it is our opponent's turn first, because he's receiving, he proceeds to run his vampires down the flanks, which is a pretty good move on his part, since he'll be able to get some nice throws in, potentially, if he can get that ball in the hands of a vampire and remain completely uncontested by the tackle zones of my halflings, which isn't hard to do when you can punch them all, but we do outnumber him vastly in my section of the field. That's the one thing we have going for us. As you can see, he runs his vampire player over to the ball, manages to pick it up successfully, and he proceeds to create a little bit of a wall with his remaining vampire players. And then he goes to block my halfling with one of his thralls and knocks him clean out, unfortunately. But such is life, unfortunately. There you go, that's what happens. We have been pretty damn lucky up till now, so he deserved a bit of help there. However, it's now my turn, and my treemen don't take well to seeing their fellow little ones beaten the hell out of, so they proceed to lay down some beats themselves. And first of all, it's this treeman up to block who proceeds to smash one of the thralls across the face, and what was the result? Oh, just a badly hurt, but still, that's another thrall who's not on the pitch for the rest of the game. I then run down my other halfling towards the thrall and beat down this thrall, even though I didn't need to. I think it was just to get the 3 dice. Yeah, that was it, yeah. And consequently I choose the defender stumbles result with this treeman's block, and we knock out another thrall, so we get a 2 for 1, so that's pretty damn good. Again, our opponent's losing thralls by the shitload here, and he'll definitely begin to having some problems if he fails a bloodlust roll. I then use the bottom group of halflings on the pitch to go and surround these vampires down there in an effort to both lock them up a bit and force my opponent in a certain direction, i.e. north. As you can see, I come in here and blitz this vampire after setting up a load of modifiers with my halflings, and proceed to knock him down. Again, no injury, but vampires on the floor are vampires who aren't creating tackle zones or beating the hell out of your own halflings. And then we push back the other thrall so that he can't get a block on us in his turn. So we've pretty much screwed up the vampire player's little vampire and thrall combo down at the bottom of the field. And I sweep around to create a little bit of a pretty flimsy wall at the top of the pitch. Now it's the vampire's player's turn, and he proceeds to run around to one of my halflings. What purpose? I'm not entirely sure. And then runs his other thrall and his vampires to the top of the pitch. As you can see here, our influence actually left its mark on him, and he is going the way we're kind of encouraging him to, which is wasting a bit of his time since he was actually closer to the south than he was to the north originally. And so he just runs his players up and reinforces that wall by sending his middle thrall there. his knocker outer of Halfling Thrall. He dodges out with his vampire and gets himself a little bit of space between the mob and himself, and then it's back to our turn. Now, whilst that wall isn't going to be the easiest thing in the world to get past, it's certainly not impenetrable, especially for the slick manoeuvres of a dodging Halfling team. First thing I do, however, is lob a Halfling over in the general direction of his vampire, and then proceed to run another Halfling down around and use some GFIs to get as close as I can to the ball carrier. As you can tell, I am going to try and blitz him. I move my treeman up towards the wall so that in time I can potentially break it down and at least, at the very least, just threaten the wall with my treeman. And luckily, thanks to having rerolls, I managed to succeed in sending my Halflings right around to that ball carrier and getting the modifiers I'd need to get a 2 dice block on him. Oh, but I didn't. I got a 1 dice block on him. And consequently we scored the both down result. But, extremely fortunately for us, we both managed to get knocked to the floor and stunned. Now that's a better result for us than it is for him, because without armour of 6 it's very likely we're going to be suffering results like that. But he should, generally speaking, not have to be on the receiving end of such bad things, but he was at this case. He drops the ball, and unfortunately he doesn't drop it in a particularly nice area since his vampire wall is still quite close to it. He then sends a thrall in to blitz one of my Halflings out of the way. In all honesty, he should have probably tried to manoeuvre his thrall to where his vampire is and tried to pick up the ball with his vampire, since he'd obviously get an additional add 1 to picking it up, and also it'd be that much harder for us to knock him back down once he has got the ball in his hands. But he doesn't, and he muffs it up. It's our turn, and I'm sending the Halfling team up to go and threaten his 4 vampire team at the top of that field right there. The other vampires that are in my side of the pitch at the moment are completely useless. If I can completely lock him down right now, this is my idea anyway, if I can completely create as many tackle zones and lock up as many vampires as I can right now, he'll have a damn hard time getting to that ball. I proceed to throw another Halfling straight in the direction of the vampires. Luckily he doesn't land on anyone and cause me to suffer any turnovers. Actually, I don't think he does unless he's carrying the ball. But then my other treatment proceeds to take root, meaning yet again he can't do anything for the rest of the bloody drive. So he'll be standing there looking pretty for the time being. And I run down here and get myself a 1 dice block on this thrall. And thanks to being extremely lucky constantly throughout this game, we managed to stun him. And then I proceed to dodge through the tackle zone of the vampire and pick up the ball. Luckily I had rerolls on my side, so that's why I decided to take a slightly quite a risky manoeuvre. Once picking up the ball, I run back to the safe arms of my other Halfling squaddies so that I can try and deny him the ability to get any 2 dice blocks on me. So if he wants to try and get the ball from my ball carrier here, he's going to have to enter into quite dangerous territory himself. Now, as you can see here, he begins to bring his thrall up to lock up one of my Halflings. It's the least important Halfling right now, but if my ball carrier does get knocked over and the ball falls in a particularly bad way behind my players, that one Halfling could have been the most important Halfling on the team at that particular moment in time. But here he goes, hypnotising one of my Halflings to lock him down. I mean, he may as well, since he doesn't want to blitz with his vampire. Since he's going to end his move there anyway, he might as well hypnotise him for added measure. And then he proceeds to try and blitz this particular Halfling with his thrall. Why he did this, I'm not entirely sure. I guess it's just so that I can't hand off the ball and score in my next turn. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And he gets a stun result, as he will likely often be doing, as he should be doing, because Halflings have such terrible armour. Knocking them over isn't easy, since there's only 1 result on the dice, unless you have the block skill, in which case you can take the both down result and then have 2 particular dice results that will knock down a Halfling. But if you don't have that, there's only 1 dice result, the power result, that will knock down a Halfling, thanks to having the dodge skill. The vampire, as you can see here, is running off the pitch, the reason being that he failed his bloodlust roll. And for some reason, he didn't bite the thrall despite having the opportunity to. I think my opponent just ran out of time here and somehow didn't manage to find the time to be able to bite the thrall and keep himself on the pitch, which is a bit of a loss for him, as you'd rather have a vampire on the pitch than a thrall. But there you go. And as you can see here, I surround this vampire at the top of the pitch so that if he does get up, he'll have a bit of trouble manoeuvring himself over to my ball carrier, who I'm going to try and send in to score at this moment in time. Unfortunately, we completely screw it up, land straight on the vampire and drop the ball, which, well, is not a good result, but at least the ball's in the tackle zone of one of my halflings, and it's deep in my opponent's side, with my ball carrier being able to stand up in the tackle zone of the vampire. Now, in an effort to try and get the ball, he tries to blitz one of my halflings out of the way, which he's successful in doing, and proceeds to push him back as so. However, in an effort to try and dodge out of the tackle zone of the other halfling and get the ball, he falls over and badly hurts himself, and fails his regeneration roll as it goes, which means things could literally, well, they could have gone slightly better. I mean, he could have died, but other than that, they pretty much went as well as they could for me. This isn't the sort of luck you ever want to rely on. This is just me being a completely lucky bastard in this game. And as you can see here, I surround the ball with two guys, just in case we proceed to screw up picking up the ball, and run in the Cheddar Chief to pick it up, and run north in an effort to try and delay as much time as we can, so that we can score at the last moment, giving our opponent as few turns as possible left to score back himself. Bit of a risky manoeuvre, but since he's only got one thrall to possibly blitz my halfling, I was feeling fairly confident. And after knocking out that guy with my treatment, my opponent exits the game. I think he just lost all morale here. Admittedly, I was extremely lucky in this game. And I think he just completely lost his temper and decided to exit out. As you can see here, we got 2 MVPs out of it though. One going to the Cheddar Chief, the guy who originally scored and was about to score again, and another MVP going to Perciel Pancetta, which may be spelt wrongly, I'm not sure. Hi there, welcome back, and as you can see here we are in the Twinkle Tits team management screen with our full roster of 16 players. This particular guy, Mr. Crimping Wesley, has had his ankle smashed in that previous game, and as a consequence he now has one less movement. So as well as being a halfling, which means he's naturally shit, he on top of that is an injured halfling. He won't be around for the next game, meaning we won't have to worry about his team value for that game, but the game after that he would be around, and he would be adding an extra 30 value to our team, which is of no use to us when we've got other halflings equally comparable, but who actually have intact ankles and can move at the full 5 movement. So I think it might be time to fire Mr. Crimping Wesley. Yep, I think it's time. Goodbye, sir. It was nice knowing you, but it's time for you to go. We could fill it in with another substitution, but we had about 4 or 5 subs in that last game, so I'm going to take the executive decision to say we actually have enough right now. Once we start seeing men dismembered, then we'll start adding in some more subs. But for now, I think 15 players should do just fine. As you can see here, though, our Mr. Cheddar Chief, he actually has a skill point to put in. So let's go and check that out. Ooh, and we have rolled a double result. I think I may have to choose add 1 movement allowance. Armor value will keep them alive, but they're also crap anyway. 7 armor really isn't all that much. I mean, obviously 6 is worse, but if people are going for you, 7 isn't going to hold you in place any more than 6 really. I think I may go for the add 1 movement allowance. Having a halfling that can get thrown and then leg it all the way to the end of the pitch would be very useful. I think that's what I'm going to do. Add 1 movement for you, mister. Thank you very much. And now we've got an extra sprinty little halfling. Unfortunately, our opponents will probably notice that and beeline for him first. But that's the way the cookie crumbles and all that shit. We also have, as you can see, Partial Pancetta earned the MVP. Consequently, he got an extra 5 SPPs, which is excellent for us, because getting those SPPs with halflings is pretty difficult. But we did get 3 with Broccoli and 3 with Percy Pinch Teeth. I imagine they must have badly hurt someone, which is amazing because they're halflings. But we've got an extra 2 on our treeman here, which came from what? I don't know, because I'm sure you get 3 for badly injuring someone. So perhaps it came from throwing a halfling? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. But as you can see here, our team's doing pretty good now. I mean, team value of 910, so it's still pretty cheap considering we've got 15 players. And unfortunately, the team value for our star captain player has risen to double what it would normally be because of that 1 movement. But that's how it goes, you know. I will take that 1 movement happily. It could be the thing that makes the difference between us getting a goal and not getting one. As for the rest of it, Apothecary, 50,000. I'm not sure. I think we might have enough rerolls, especially considering the Halfling Chef. I mean, we may not always be able to get the Halfling Chef if our opponent's team value is as low as ours. But I think 4 will be enough for now. I'm going to hope that it is. Right, yeah. I think, you know, I may invest in an Apothecary. Most of these Halflings probably aren't particularly worth saving, especially at this point. But considering we've got some SPPs on a few of them now, and 1 movement, which is not easy to get, I think I may well try it and save a few of their hides if they get crushed. And blam, there we go, we now have an Apothecary as well. We will save that, and I will see you, hopefully, in the next game. Hope you have a lovely day, you gorgeous bastard, and I will see you later. Bye bye.